Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Friday, November 1st, and the 2024 baseball season, it's over. It's done. The Los Angeles Dodgers are your World Series champions. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, how are we feeling about those Dodgers?
Those Dodgers, man, inevitable, I guess is the word you could say. I think we both said 7 games. Needless to say, we probably overestimated the New York Yankees just a little bit. The Dodgers steamroll in a lot of respects onto their 8th franchise World Series title. Freddie Freeman represents Canada nicely, winning World Series MVP. And now, if you'll allow me to warm up my pipes, it's the most wonderful time of the year. It's off-season time and it's silly season time. And assuming that we don't end up with a constipated offseason like we did last year with the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, the Juan Soto sweepstakes are sure to be a lot of fun, and all of the various other moves that are sure to come down the pipe. We've already got a couple. The Angels are getting busy, and the Blue Jays are just chilling at the moment.
Yeah, we're in the quiet period, but the Angels are
They didn't get
already
the memo. They did not get the
no,
memo.
they're making moves. They're calling up every NL East team looking to see what they can get. They acquired Jorge Soler from the Braves. They just before we hit the record button acquired Scott Kingery from the Phillies.
Are you not entertained?
It's thrilling. We are off to a hot start. And the Mets, they signed Dylan Covey. Huge move. Like just league shattering. But anyways, we'll get into it. The Dodgers, yes, a lot of Blue Jays connections. Kevin Kiermaier rides off in the sunset with his ring. Teoscar Hernandez wins his World Series ring, obviously his second one, of course. Kevin Biggio, potential World Series ring recipient. Ryan Yarbrough probably going to be a World Series ring recipient. These man, what a Blue Jays infused roster they had.
Yeah, lots of Blue Jays connections for sure. I think of all of those, the easy one to cheer for is obviously Teoscar Hernandez, a guy that Blue Jays fans still love very dearly. And for him to get his, although it's his second ring, and in a lot of respects, it's really like his first. It was Hazel May interviewed him right after, and she talked about, you were given a ring in the 2015 one with or excuse me, 2017 with the Astros, but wasn't really the same thing. And this one he really contributes to, and it's a bit of a different story.
Hell,
So
he had the big swing in the game
exactly,
five win, the double off Garrett Cole after the Yankees made as many, like maybe one of the worst innings you'll ever see a major league team put
it was
together.
reminiscent of the 2015 Texas Rangers and the Joey Bat flip, and of course, all those years of calling Teoscar Hernandez the next Jose Bautista, he has his moment in the sun. I just couldn't help but think of that. The other guy, of course, is Kevin Kiermaier. As you mentioned, it's nice for him to ride off into the sunset. What a crazy thing to say, given the animosity for him like 2 years ago from Blue Jays fans. You think of the whole card stealing situation with Alejandro Kirk, and now in a lot of respects, he's kind of a Blue Jays fan favorite. And did he pander? Maybe was he maybe playing it up a little bit? I don't know, but
Have you ever seen anybody pander better than Kevin Kiermaier?
he did what he needed to do to catch the affection of Blue Jays fans. So I'm sure Rays fans are pleased to see him walk off with a ring, and Blue Jays fans alike are undoubtedly happy for him as well.
Yeah, he had that interview with Hazel before, I believe it was before game four, where he talked about that he's going into coaching or he's very excited to become a coach. So, I'm sure that'll likely be with the Tampa Bay Rays, but could be with the Blue Jays. You never know.
If he can teach whoever's playing center field for them, I mean, not that Jose Siri isn't a capable center fielder, but whoever is the heir apparent there, whatnot, how to defend center field like the way he does, then surely the Rays will be in good hands.
Yeah, let me share this story real quick because so when we were in school and we were interviewing the players from the University of Tampa baseball team, they had a guest coach that season, and I believe in other seasons, and that their guest coach was the one and only Kevin Kiermaier. So learning from some of their players was like Kate Kiermaier was a really good outfield coach for them. And he actually helped them win, I believe it was their regional, based on something that he taught them in spring training or whatever in their lead up to the season. And it was this play where with a runner tagging on a long fly ball that the outfielder goes up and instead of catching it and trying to throw the guy out, the outfielder pretends to catch it and then drops down and catches it lower so that the runner leaves early before the outfielder catches it. And then the guy leaves early so they can throw him out at the base. And so they were in an extra inning game to win their regional. And their center fielder, his name is Jordan Lala, pulled that off. And I just think like just a hilarious story to see like a major leaguer having that kind of impact on like a Division II school and helping them win and advance, I think is a crazy, crazy story.
The baseball IQ on that one too. I mean, unshocking that Kevin Kiermaier oozing baseball IQ, but that's a great story.
Yeah, it's something that, I'm sure if you asked him about it, he probably wouldn't take credit for it. But yeah, really cool for sure. We're here today to talk not about Kevin Kiermaier, but instead to talk about the Blue Jays offseason and kind of tee up what we are expecting in the next couple months. Next week, we are going to do our ideal Blue Jays offseason as we did last year. We'll put together those pieces for Substack, and we will also record a podcast with some of our thoughts and ideas. Today, we're just going to kind of go through the schedule a little bit, talk about some of the important dates and what we might expect from the Blue Jays player wise and from what each of these deadlines can represent for them. So starting off, of course, we are in the quiet period, which ends Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And that is also the deadline for, well, not the deadline, but I mean that allows players to begin speaking with players other than their original franchise. It is also the deadline for teams to offer players qualifying offers, and also the deadline for teams to accept or decline, or for players to accept or decline their team or player options for 2025. Of course, the Blue Jays do not have anybody because they traded away all of their pending free agents, and Ryan Yarbrough is the only one, and he is not qualifying offer eligible, and he does not have a team
Not
option, so the Blue
not
Jays don't have to worry about that.
not that you were going to be QOing Ryan Yarbrough anyways, but no, they'll their decisions will come. But for now, the quiet period is not just the call it name of the period league wide, but definitely for the Blue Jays, it's a bit of a down period, but still some opportunities to discuss kind of what we see going on the rest of the way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, you can start signing free agents right away as soon as that quiet period is up. Do you expect the Blue Jays to be active right away, or do you think it's going to be one of those things? I know you already said like it's going to be similar to last season with Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani. But are you expecting like any, Blue Jays moves to like come in the next couple weeks?
I, I mean, based on everything we're kind of hearing, it doesn't seem to me like the Blue Jays are quite at the stage where they're kind of eyeing guys up. There haven't been rumors circulating about this guy or that guy. There hasn't been a lot of, the Jays are sniffing around on this dude and whatnot. It's in a lot of respects kind of just the start of the offseason. So maybe in some respects it's too early, but I would be pretty surprised based on what we're hearing on the Blue Jays being extraordinarily active in the first month or so. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to be, hunting guys down. You figure guys like the aforementioned Oscar Hernandez, and of course the widely reported Anthony Santander connection, although that one hasn't really been made official so much as it's just kind of an obvious connection that the Blue Jays will presumably be pursuing. But I would suspect that the Blue Jays will be hunting around, but I don't think that we're going to be seeing a lot in terms of movement early on. I think of, a couple of years back, again, I point to Teoscar Hernandez, and that was a deal where, they hadn't come to a contract extension, and it seemed like they kind of had to move on from him. And that was ultimately a deal that they were going to kick off the offseason with one way or another, right? It might not have been immediate, like the way they ultimately played it out, but it was something that they clearly wanted to do, and they wanted to get that, you know, payroll flexibility sorted out sooner rather than later. So I would suspect that this year there's not quite that kind of urgency on anybody. I mean, you'd like to maybe get Vladdy extended, but I don't know how much that really impacts something like the payroll flexibility of this year. So beyond that, I just don't see a universe where the Blue Jays are extraordinarily active prior to at least the winter meetings or thereabouts.
Yeah, I think last year, the November Blue Jay signings were Peyton Henry and Paolo Espino. Like it wasn't anything significant, right? And there's a few points I want to get your thoughts on. Obviously, the first one is you mentioned it, the Vlad extension, right? Like that is, I think, something that if it is going to happen, we're going to see it in November. Because it's a good free agent selling tool, right? Like you're probably not going to sign somebody like Juan Soto unless you have Vlad extended long term, right? Like I think it just sends a signal to free agents that you are planning to contend for however long Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is in Toronto for, and so extending him kind of puts gives free agents potential signings the comfort of knowing that they're going to be joining a team that wants to win. And then the other thing I want to get your opinion on is last year, obviously the Shohei Ohtani hunt took up the large majority of the Blue Jays time, the large majority of like a lot of our time, and the Blue Jays front office was probably fairly criticized for not having like a pivot, a backup plan. Do you think that we could see like some of those backup plans in action before Juan Soto signs in the next month? Or not even a
Again,
backup plan, but just like secondary
I have
ideas.
I have a hard time seeing it. I think everyone's going to be waiting for Soto because I think that's going to set the market in a lot of respects, just broadly speaking, right? I mean, not that there's anyone in that Soto class, but that contract's going to do nothing but raise the floor for basically everybody. Um, so I think it'd be really surprising if we saw anybody like a Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander, just because they're both corner outfielders like Soto. I'd be very surprised if either of them signed before Soto did it. And even, there's other guys, right? Like even an Alex Bregman, right? Like these are all guys that are going to be hunting big contracts and they're going to be looking for cash. And if a team misses out on Juan Soto, suddenly they're going to have this big pool of money and no generational outfielder to spend it on. So that's where that money's going to end up flowing. It's going to go to the Bregmans and the Teoscars, and even though it's a different position, the Max Frieds, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I mean, if you're one of these teams like that isn't planning on signing Juan Soto, and I'm sure the Blue Jays are fully gonna be trying their best to get in the Juan Soto sweepstakes and see if they can, pull off the unimaginable. I think Juan Soto would just, obviously he's one of the best players in baseball. He's 26 years old and has one of the better resumes for a 26-year-old in baseball ever. I mean, of course, there was like the tweets during the playoffs where it's like Juan Soto is younger than O'Neal Cruz and has more career walks than Ernie Banks. Like he's a once in a generation type player, and so of course the Blue Jays are probably going to be in on him. Um, but I wonder if that, like we do mention that players will probably wait because their salaries probably go up after Juan Soto signs. But is there an opportunity for teams to kind of get in on some of these lesser free agents and sign them while teams are focused on Soto?
Yeah, no, it's the chance to jump the market, but I just wonder if teams, or excuse me, if players are going to be open to that idea when it feels like they would be better off waiting, right? There's going to be a bit of a Goldilocks zone like there is every year, right? I mean, if you wait all the way till February, you're not going to get anything. You're going to get, the scraps of what's left. But also, I mean, you sign too early and you might be leaving money on the table. So it'll be a delicate balance like it always is. But I suspect this year in a unique way, unlike, last year with the Ohtani sweepstakes, there was really a very clear group that was going to be in the mix there and everyone else could kind of do what they needed to do. And maybe the players were waiting, but it was really just kind of a bated breath sort of thing, right? This year, I think in a different and unique way, you know, Soto doesn't completely change the trajectory of a team in the way that, Shohei Ohtani did. So to me, there'll still be opportunities for other teams to be active if they're not in the Soto sweepstakes to go out and try to acquire guys and try to change up, you know, the makeup of their team and so forth, right? So I mean, we say this every year, but this does feel like an offseason that has the potential to be very exciting and for good reason.
What are your thoughts on the Vlad extension and how that might impact any potential free agents?
It's got to happen. It's clearly has to happen if the Blue Jays are serious about trying to go out and court a really talented player, right? If they are serious about this Juan Soto thing, and they've been linked a couple times now, it's not just once, it's twice, three times, whatever it may be, then they're going to have to spend that money elsewhere too. And it's probably going to be best spent on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You got to look at giving him probably, 10-3, 11-33, whatever it might be. And you've got to get that figured out and you've got to get that sorted out sooner rather than later because this stage of the at this stage of the Blue Jays trajectory, A, without him, you're screwed. And B, you don't have anything to pitch to free agents because what does this team look like next year? It doesn't look like anything next year because Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and presumably Bo Bichette are not there.
Yeah, it's got to get it done. I think it's this month is probably the time to do it. Absolutely, there's no better time to do it than now. It's
Now I wonder if Vlad is so close to free agency at this point that he's kind of like, what's the point? Why bother signing now, right? But the hope, I guess, is that he's expressed enough, interest in staying that they're able to come to something. But there needs to be an urgency there, and I don't feel like this is a front office that operates under urgency much.
do you do you think that he would be interested in seeing what Juan Soto gets?
Yes, for sure. Because again, just like everyone else, it's Juan Soto raises his floor, right? So it's kind of a bit of a catch-22 where it's like you need Vladdy to sign Soto, but Soto probably would like to, or Vladdy would probably like Soto to sign before he does. So you're in a bit of a pickle here, but they've got
Yeah.
to find a way to sort it out.
Maybe Soto and Vlad can do a little a little behind the scenes chatting and Vlad be like,
A
"Yeah,
little,
man,
a
come
little
I'll
Heatles
sign.
action, a little
I'll
Heatles
sign my
action.
extension, but only after you sign in Toronto so that I
Yeah,
can I
a
can get
little
more money."
Kawhi, Paul George stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that's realistically what the Blue Jays kind of are going to need to happen if they want to get Juan Soto, right? Right now the Blue Jays are like a 0.5%, maybe 1% to sign this guy. Um, but
Yeah.
if those two can be pals, I mean, we saw it on the field. Those two are
I
buddies. If
I
Vlad
think
can if Vlad can work his magic,
I think Juan Soto's post World Series media scrum made it very clear that he does not care about any of the off field stuff. Like he is going to go to the team that pays him the most.
that makes sense. So is it going to be the Blue Jays? They'll have a shot.
You could do it. You just give him a blank check. I mean, Rogers probably has the money to do it. We saw it with Shohei Ohtani. You could do it again. You could give Juan Soto 700 million and challenge Steve Conan, challenge the Steinbrenners and see if they're willing to go that high. But I want to preface this with obviously we're talking about Juan Soto a lot and this is the exact, I don't want to have like the similar experience of the Shohei Ohtani last year where obviously we like get pretty
Story
far
of the
down the
offseason.
road.
It's the story of the
It's the
offseason.
story of the offseason, 100%. And the Blue Jays are going to be in the mix. Um, However, I do think it is unlikely that Juan Soto is a Blue Jay.
Yes, like I said, maybe 0.5%, maybe
Yeah.
1%, but fun dream.
Give him the money. Give him the $800 million contract. All right, let's keep on moving because so obviously the quiet period ends on Monday. Free agents can start signing. After that, the next deadline is on November 19th, where there is the roster deadline for having your 40-man kind of set or your Rule 5 eligible players protected. The Blue Jays have 43 players on their 40-man roster right now, not including Ryan Yarbrough. And we can kind of look at the finance stuff too. I mean, Fangraphs currently has their projected roster at just below 200 million. That includes all the arbitration projections and all this stuff. And Shapiro, during his end of season availability, said that he didn't see payroll switching up that much. So that gives them about 30 to 40 million to play with. And so obviously I think Juan Soto again probably is like the Shohei Ohtani tier where that changes your trajectory and then allows you to spend more money than that. But looking at the roster the way that it is right now with 43 guys, so you have to remove three guys from the 40 man before that Rule 5 deadline. And then they have some Rule 5 eligible players that I think like could be um other teams could look at and potentially take. Like Will Robertson is Rule 5 eligible. He's gonna be 27, so he's older, but he was also pretty solid in AAA. Like I think he was probably major league ready as a right-handed platoon bat. Desan Brown is there. I'm not sure if teams would be all that into taking Desan Brown at this point. Trenton Wallace is a guy who reached AAA who, again, older. He's like closer to 26. He's kind of in that range. Chad Dallas was Rule 5 eligible, but of course, with the arm injury, he will. Somebody could take, actually, that would be interesting to me, Chad Dallas, because he's having the surgery, right? So somebody could take him
Yeah, but you
and
can't.
then
No, but
just,
you can't just
you,
stat. You
can, you
can't just
can,
stash him.
you
You
can,
can't.
like on the
They
IL.
have, but they have to play. They have to be. There's some stuff there where it's like you can't. They would the following year they would still have like Rule 5. They
Yeah,
would
he
still
would
have
have
to
to play the
abide by.
following year.
Yeah, you'd have to play. Like they're not. There's you have to reach certain thresholds to that. They kind of, and I don't have the exact numbers, but they don't get to just stash him and then he becomes immediately minor league eligible, so to speak. They would still have to. There's a
Yeah.
minimum, not necessarily that they can't take him, somebody whoever it may be, but he can't just be taken and stashed and then shoved in the minors after he spends the year rehabbing.
Yeah, he would have to be on the major league roster the following year.
Yeah, which to
So,
be
I mean,
fair, it's still a possibility,
yeah.
but it would be a lot to invest a year in the guy and then just to have him. It would if you failed, you basically have ruined the guy's career prospects.
Yeah. Another guy, Rule 5 eligible, Lazaro Estrada. He's throwing pretty well in Arizona right now. Connor Cook is Rule 5 eligible. Eric Pardinho is Rule 5 eligible. I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of names that are going to be Rule 5 eligible, and like you don't really see like these guys are all like kind of I think on the edge. I think it CJ Van Eyck as well. Like, I mean, are there any of those guys that you would be concerned about the Blue Jays losing?
Maybe Cook. Maybe, I mean, he looked like he might be an outside shot to pitch for them at some points this year, and obviously that didn't come to pass. Pardinho had a big year. He's a guy that maybe I'm less worried about losing, and more I think that he could contribute to the Blue Jays next season. So I'm not sure if you need to put a reliever on the 40 man, especially one as raw as him. But I mean, there's going to be a lot of guys that they honestly consider non-tendering. I think of, Tate's an obvious one. I think Zach Pop probably is a good candidate to get non-tendered. We're hearing reports now that Romano's health might be in question, and they might have to decide if they want to ultimately bring him back. And if they don't bring him back and he's not Jordan Romano anymore, then you've suddenly got an even more egregious hole in your bullpen, right?
Yeah.
So the bullpen question itself is going to be just a dark cloud
I
hanging
mean,
over this bullpen this offseason.
yeah, in the context of the Rule 5 and like having to get your 40-man roster down to 40 players, let me just read you like some of the guys who are currently on the 40-man roster, and you can tell me how easily
there
you
will
think
be
that they
there will
can.
be there will be a purge. I don't doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, like right now they have Brett DeGus, Hagen Danner, Dylan Tate, Tommy Nance, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Luis Frias, Easton Lucas, Nick Robertson, Nick Raposo, Tyler Heineman, Luis De Los Santos, Stuart Baroa, Nathan Lucas. Like all these guys are on their 40-man roster right now. So realistically, I
They'll be
think
able to
they're,
make they'll be able to make room. Like that's not really a question, right? But
yeah,
there's a lot of guys on there that don't need to be on a 40-man
like
roster.
you obviously if you do DFA them, then you risk losing them to another team.
But
But
I mean, how much do you really, you know,
yeah, because everybody's going to be having that kind of roster crunch, right? So I
exactly.
think if you designate Emmanuel Ramirez for assignment right now, I don't think you're going to lose him.
No, probably not. There's the 40-man roster spots at this stage of the year are just too valuable for
Yeah.
most teams because they've got their own guys that are newly Rule 5 eligible, and they've got to, there'll be lots of churning going on. And there'll be guys that get DFA'd and non-tendered that are going to be very attractive. I mean, we haven't even gotten into that, and we'll probably get into that maybe even next episode, but
Yeah. I think
there will
last
be.
offseason, like Wes Parsons was a guy who ended the year on the 40 man and then got DFA'd in the offseason and then stayed on the roster and then came back for he made the opening day roster and then he got DFA'd and was claimed by Cleveland like two weeks in. So, there's always that
There will
kind of
be
stuff.
lots of change. There will be lots of churning going on over the next, call it even like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the tender. So that deadline for Rule 5 is November 19th. The next deadline is November 22nd, and this is where the Blue Jays have to decide on all of their arbitration eligible players if they want to tender them a contract and bring them back. So of course they have Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Eric Swanson, Jordan Romano, Yenesis Cabrera, Dylan Tate, Dalton Varsho, Alejandro Kirk, Alec Manoah, Zach Pop, and Ernie Clement as their arbitration eligible players. Jory already mentioned, Tate, Swanson, Romano are probably the only
You don't think Pop?
non-tender. You want to get into the Pop
Yeah,
debate?
I do want to get into the Pop thing. The guy's going to be 28 on opening day next year. I know that he's super two, so this is maybe getting too much into the finer details. But I know that they have a lot of team control on him left. But is there any reason to bring back a guy that was just not playable, basically? Even if because he's gonna be 28. Like, I get that you've lots of team control on him, but also he's gonna be 30 in 2 seasons. Like, it's not like you're gonna be getting his prime years during his Super 2 eligibility.
Going to give the listeners a little behind the curtains look here because Jory is flipping up on me right now. We had this debate like 2 weeks ago, and Jory's like, "Oh, you can't non-tender Zach Pop. It's only
I've changed my
$1 million."
mind. I've changed my mind. I'm a different man today than I was 2 weeks ago. No, I
It's
know that we I
it's
know that
it's
we I know that I flip flopped. I absolutely flip flopped, but I also think that at this stage, I mean, I think that I was probably higher on Zach Pop than I needed to be. I know that you had all this Super 2 eligibility. I also don't think I realized this guy was going to be 28 on opening day next year.
yeah, like he has a negative career WAR. It is $1 million, and this was the argument that you made that kind of convinced me a couple weeks ago, where it's like it's $1 million for a dude that you can stash in Buffalo. That like tendering his contract doesn't mean that he has to be on the 2024 roster. I think just from like an asset management perspective, like you can't just let a 28-year-old reliever go for nothing.
I just don't think I don't see the upside I don't want to pay a guy $1 million to sit in Buffalo. I just don't. To me, you can pay half that for a guy to sit in Buffalo. What's the difference between Eric Pardinho, Connor Cook, and Zach Pop, in your opinion, next year?
In my opinion, for next year, it's that Zach Pop has pitched in the major leagues, and you kind of know what you're going to get from him, and you have absolutely no idea what you're going to get from Pardinho or
Do
Connor
you do
Cook.
you genuinely think that based on what we saw last year from Zach Pop, you are comfortable with being like, we know what we're gonna get from him?
Yeah, it's you know what you're going to get from him, and it's not good.
Yeah. So what's the upside there? If you're trying to improve the team, what's the point of keeping Zach Pop around?
I mean, the upside is that like you when you watch Zach Pop pitch, you're like, yeah,
This is
he
so
could be a
funny.
good
We
reliever.
completely flipped here. We've
The
completely flipped here.
when you watch Zach Pop pitch, he has like the stuff to be an effective major league reliever. Like he's got like the bowling ball sinker, he's got the really good slider, and like he was really good in 2022. Well, not really good in 2022. He had a 2.77 ERA in the major leagues in 2022. But for a guy like, I mean, I just think for $1 million, like you lose him for nothing. Um I don't want to like plant my flag on Zach Bob because if they DFA him, I think I would be totally fine with that decision because non-tender him. I'd be totally fine with that decision because he was not good. He totally stopped striking people out in 2024 and was one of their most used relievers in an awful bullpen, and he was a large part of it being an awful bullpen. Um, but yeah, like I mean, I just think $1 million to keep him on the roster. You could trade him if you wanted, like throw him into a trade, whatever you want to do. Like I just do I want him to be on in the 2024 bullpen? No. Do I think that losing him for nothing would be not the best use of him as a player? Yes.
Since 2022, uh, he has so he pitched for the Marlins, obviously 2022, then was traded to the Jays. Also spent 2023 with the Jays, and then 2024 with the Jays. Okay. Since the start of 2022, he has had a K per nine over 6.3 in chunks, so to speak. And this is not a great, metric, whatever you want to call it, in terms of how I'm dividing this. But in 2023, for 13.2 innings, he had a 9.2 K per nine. Outside of that, for 2022, with the Marlins, with the Blue Jays, and then this year, he's struck out as a reliever. He struck out 5.8 guys in 2022, 5.2 as a Blue Jay K per nine. And then this year, he had a 6.1 K per nine. This guy, when he's asked to pitch anything resembling bulk innings, a substantial number of innings, does not miss bats enough. And I get that he's got the bowling ball sinker, but he also gets hammered too. I mean, the last 2 years, he's got a home run per nine. And again, I know that per nine stats are not the greatest, but he's almost got a home run per nine of two. Like this guy gets drilled when he's asked to pitch.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think he's probably a guy that you don't want in your bullpen if you're planning on being a contender.
So why? So if you don't want this guy in your bullpen,
I mean, but who are you going to turn around and give $1 million to? Like, I
it's
don't think
not.
that
It's not.
$1 million is going to make
No,
a
it's
difference.
not. But it's the flexibility. It's the 40-man spot. It's the ability to have other guys push up further up the system, like a Pardinho, like a Cook. He's a placeholder guy. I think to be married to a placeholder guy for $1 million, even though $1 million in the grand scheme of things for the Blue Jays is chump change, is a waste of resources. Is that $1 million going to matter at the end of the day? Probably not. It's what is it? It's less than a half a percent of their projected 2025 payroll, but it's less about that and more about the 40-man roster spot that you're going to be wasting. And then when he presumably gets DFA'd at some point, you're paying a guy that's not even on the 40-man roster $1 million, which is just nonsensical.
I would like to say that I'm definitely not married to having Zach Pop. Yeah, genuinely, if he gets non-tendered, totally fine with it. I actually think, one of the things that I think that I've criticized the Blue Jays for is like being a little bit too taking too long to promote guys, right? Like I think the fact that Zach Pop threw nearly 50 major league innings, that he almost got 60 games on the mound for the Blue Jays in 2024, while you had guys like Pardinho and
It's frankly
Mason
ridiculous.
Fluharty and like,
It's
you know,
nonsensical.
all these other relievers. Like it probably would have been better to give them a shot because they wouldn't have given you anything worse than Zach Pop did in 2024. My point is just that it seems like for a guy for $1 million who has gotten outs at the major league level, very low bar. That losing him for nothing, like how much is Zach Pop making as a free agent?
He's getting a minor league deal. He's getting
Yeah.
brought into a spring training invite. But to me, if that's what he's going to get, then go give that to him in
I mean,
February,
I
right?
guess yeah, you could non-tender him and then do that, but
There's just, to me, there's no reason to guarantee him anything at this
I
stage.
was I was not expecting to have the Zach Pop conversation here.
Listen, it's early in the offseason and we're talking non-tender candidates. We are going to have the Zach Pop conversation. We are going to lock in on Zach Pop.
Okay, let's look at some of the other ones. I mean, Swanson and Tate. We can do Tate quick. Like, I mean, I think $2 million there. I think that's a little bit more significant for a guy who had some velo issues and obviously was like claimed off waivers and just had a really bad year. Like he has a better track record than Zach Pop does.
For sure. For sure.
Um, but again, like with that roster spot there, and the K rate for him going down, and obviously the velo dropping, I think that's a fairly easy non-tender.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't really see any reason to to tender him a contract, I would say that he's, you know, thanks for your service. Thanks for filling up some innings while we
Three of them.
basically sunk on the last month or change of the year. So long and have fun in Japan, probably.
Yeah, he's probably a guy that you could like non-tender and then bring back on a minor league deal if you
If you
wanted.
felt so strongly about those 3 innings, then
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
there's really no reason to consider him. I think Pop, or excuse me, Swanson. I think of those guys actually, ironically, more than Pop, is the more interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how much do you weigh like the beginning of the year being him having like so many personal issues and obviously, his son being hit by the car and just kind of like all the off-field stuff that went on and the injury and everything and then him kind of bouncing back in the second half of the year when he was brought back up after being demoted. Like how like do you think that that's enough to pay him $3 million next year?
I think so, but I don't really know. I don't really know what I think about Eric Swanson at this point, because I think there's a lot of upside given the success he had in 2023 and in 2022 as a Mariner. Don't forget that. But this year he obviously was not good enough, and there's a lot of reason to understand why that was the case. Now, in the second half this year, he had a 2.55 ERA, and he struck out 9.9 guys per nine. So like he was back to being Eric Swanson. So I think I would bring him back, but it's how concerned are you about that first half ultimately becomes the question of what do you think he is. I think he's earned a chance to have a full, complete, healthy, and normal 2025 with the Blue Jays. I think that much is fair. But I think my perception of him is definitely not the same as it was coming into 2024.
Yeah, I think the obviously the first half was really bad and we don't know how much of that to prescribe to the off-field stuff and the injury and everything like that. But I think the second half being really good and him like striking out a bunch of dudes in his last 24 innings, I think that is enough to like solidify to me that he's worth $3 million. I just think that there were things in the first half that were maybe outside of his control a little bit. And once he was able to get back into the point in the season where he was able to control what he was doing kind of on the field and kind of probably, I'm sure his life had settled down a little bit by that point. I think he showed enough that bringing him back for $3.2 million or, whatever that arbitration deal ends up looking like. Um, I think it's a fairly slam dunk that you tender that deal.
I mean, listen, that 2.55 ERA in the second half of 2024. I mean, his 2023 numbers, he had a 2.97 ERA and had a K per nine of 10 flat, basically. So
Yeah.
he basically was back to being his 2023 self in the second half of the season. Maybe the walks are up a little bit. Maybe the homers were up a little bit, but you know, it seems to me like there's reason to believe that Eric Swanson is normalized, is through that rough stretch, and should be a contributor for the Blue Jays next season. I don't know how much of a contributor. I don't know if he's going to be an eighth inning guy for the Blue Jays next year. I think I'd like him to be. I don't know if he will be, but it feels like he's a guy that can be part of the solution for next year.
Yeah, and I mean also like if you want like some more signs like second half like after you got um called back up 109 stuff plus 102 location plus 103 pitching plus. So
Like
stuff
he
stuff was
was
back.
better. He
Yeah.
was much, much better.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's an easy bring him back and tender that deal.
For sure.
Thoughts on Romano? I think it's a tough one. 7.75 million is the projection. Like it is a tough one. I think with the injury and stuff like that when you need to replace so much of your bullpen. Like that's money that you could use somewhere else. But I think that it's a guy that like maybe you just have to kind of bring back.
So I'm just looking for it now, but the Blue Jays uh, signed Kirby Yates to a 1 year, $5.5 million deal back in 2021. And that is probably the closest comparable to what's happening with Romano. So if you feel like you could, like, if the Blue Jays were comfortable at that time giving Yates 5.5, and if you consider whatever salary growth and whatnot, I can't imagine 7.775 or whatever it is that much more than what Yates gets. I think you probably do it unless you are mortified of his elbow. And we don't have that information right now. And I don't think that information has really kind of been made available. Of course, Shai Davidi tweets out yesterday to the effect of we'll see what they think of his elbow and his physicals and whatnot. And I think if he gets non-tendered, it tells you a lot about what they think. But if you suspect that his elbow is, going to get back to the stage that it was at 2 years ago, then there's no reason not to give him that kind of money.
Yeah, what they do with him will tell you the state of his elbow, right? Like
Exactly.
I think if
100%.
if whatever they decide to do, and I have a question for you. If you were another team considering Jordan Romano as a potential option, how scared off of that would you be if the Blue Jays non-tendered him?
I think if they non-tender him, he's like a guy that you're looking at maybe even having to do like tryouts for teams later in the winter, right? I mean, this was a guy that was an electric closer like 12 months ago, 15 months ago, whatever.
I mean, he would
And
be sorry, not to cut you off, but like I mean, he would also be like he would have the ability to like do physicals and stuff for other teams too.
for sure, for sure. But it would, to me, it would, like, no team is going to actively seek out Jordan Romano, I would say, if he gets non-tendered.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as far as it goes, like that's probably the only four guys where there probably is any conversation. Like Vlad, obviously you're trying to extend him. If it goes to Arb, then you're tendering that contract is all I'm gonna say. That one you're tendering Cabrera, Varsho, Kirk, Manoa, Clement. Like all those are easy tenders. So
Exactly, exactly,
we
exactly.
can yeah, we can keep moving on here. The winter meetings start December 9th. The draft lottery is December 10th, where the Blue Jays have a top five shot at the first overall pick. Or is it top seven?
They've got a shot at the. It's just the first pick. It's just for the first pick.
Sorry. Yeah, it is top five. And they have a 7.48% chance at picking first overall.
Yeah, get your
Um,
get your tankathon. Get your tankathon
yeah,
thon
should we do a
fingers
quick
ready.
sim right here?
I think we may as well. I think that would be as good a time as
The
any.
Blue Jays fell to seventh.
Oh, it's okay. That's why we're getting the bad juju out now.
Um, yeah, it's yeah, draft lottery. Obviously, it'll be like the most that you pay attention to that, hopefully in the next few years, or you have paid attention to it in the last few years. So, we'll see how that goes. Obviously, we will get into draft stuff for sure, but we don't have to do that right now. Rule 5 draft is December 11th. We talked a little bit about the guys the Blue Jays could potentially lose. I don't think that there's going to be them selecting anybody based on where we already discussed like the guys that they can non-tender. Of course, if there is somebody that they're interested in, we could see them move around some pieces on the 40 man, but I think based on what we've seen from them in the past few years that it seems unlikely that they will be very active in the Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, I think by and large this off season is going to be defined by free agency for sure. It doesn't feel like the Blue Jays have that much in terms of bullets to fire on the trade front. Maybe they look to move a couple of guys from their second base glut. Maybe they look to move a pitcher or two, maybe. But to me, it's very clear that they're going to be working with some financial flexibility and they're going to be hunting down power. Although Ross
Low hanging
Atkins
fruit.
doesn't seem to believe so. But I mean, I'm sure a byproduct of whoever they bring in. I'm sure the ability to put the bat on the ball and do damage will be a welcome sight.
Yes. And from there, the last deadline of the offseason is the, excuse me, January 9th arbitration deadline where you need to have um your deals agreed upon with your arbitration eligible players, or else they are going to a hearing. And of course, the Blue Jays are a file and trial team. So if they don't come to agreement with the players, they will go to a hearing with them after that January 9th deadline. We can cross that bridge when we get there. I think that's like that's a few months away, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of news to discuss before then. So before we get out of here, I'm gonna get two things from you: a Blue Jays offseason hot take and your favorite non Juan Soto free agent for the Blue Jays to sign.
All right. Well, for hot take, I think the easy one is that the Blue Jays are going to go trade for Devin Williams
Whoa.
because it kind of sounds like this guy might be made available, and it kind of sounds like the Blue Jays could use some really big ads on the bullpen front, as we have very much gotten into. And it kind of sounds like he might not end up costing that much because the Brewers are, as is the case with, you know, every offseason, a couple of teams are going to be doing that thing where they cycle through guys and they try to get rid of their guys that are later in the arbitration stage. So if the Blue Jays have the gusto, I think Devin Williams would be a very nice addition to this bullpen, and I think would make a lot of sense for the Blue Jays. Now, in terms of non-Soto free agents, I think that it's got to be Teoscar Hernandez, if for nothing else than the, call it, emotional attachment to him. I think that between him and Santander, you're probably getting similar production in year one. And then beyond that, who knows? But with Teoscar, at least, even though he's a little bit older, you would figure as a result, you're able to hand out less term. And I think that's probably the deciding factor. At least I view it that way, between which of those two you ultimately would rather go out and sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly would be a fun signing if they brought back Teoscar. I'll give you my hot take is that they complete a trade with the St. Louis Cardinals based
Okay.
on their history of trading. I don't think that's maybe the most hottest take, but I think the Cardinals have a bunch of dudes and are looking to transition a little bit, and the Blue Jays could provide them with some youth and
No,
some pieces.
Nolan Arenado.
If the
Do I dare?
I, I don't know if I'm gonna go there, but
All right, fair
looking in
enough.
the
Fair enough.
Ryan Helsley category,
That
the
makes sense.
Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, um, Brendan Donovan, like that kind of range of players. I think they're the Cardinals. Wilson Contreras, maybe a catcher, a little duo catcher with Kirk there. You know, somebody from the Cardinals, I think, will be
Mhm.
a Blue Jay at the end of the year. And as far as my favorite free agent, it is not Teoscar Hernandez. It is Anthony Santander.
Is this where we're gonna be beefing? Is it we're planting our flag in our corner outfielder and we're gonna see who walks away with the ultimate corner outfield bat?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe we'll see. I think we'll kind of have those debates, but the switch hitting guy who is 2 years younger and just hit 44 home runs, I kind of like that guy.
You know what? We're too busy arguing about these guys when Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins are surely on the phone trying to get Brent Rooker. That's the guy that would be fun to get.
That would
I
be
also
a
don't
heck of
know
a
if that's
trade.
happening. I don't
Heck
know
of
if
a
that's
trade.
happening.
I mean, he's old. He's older, and the A's probably have no motivation to keep him. So I think that his value will never be higher than it is right now because he has team control. He is 30. He's 30. He's still pre-arb, and he's coming off a year where he hit 293 with 39 home runs.
Yeah. I mean, would be fun. Probably not
That's a
happening.
heck of a player. and fun on Twitter too. He's we'll see. There's going to be obviously lots of time to talk in the offseason, and we will be back next week with our ideal offseason moves. We'll dig into it and we'll come out with a 2025 World Series champion.
I have no doubt in my mind.
All right. That is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us there at the Bird's Eye View podcast. If you're listening along on the podcast provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review there as well. If there's anything you want us to tackle this offseason or just want to chat with us a little bit, you can find us via email at the Bird's Eye View pod at gmail.com. And you can follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. Thank you very much for listening.